Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, welcome, and that's a very sincere welcome to the meeting today. Thank you for taking the time from whatever it is you do for a living to come here and spend some time with us today. This is a warm welcome on behalf of the board to the 2016 rate-setting meetings. Having said that, I'd like you to welcome two brand new board members, Larry Flowers. Larry, employer up. And Gary Hamblin, labor up. Besides many of the outstanding qualities these gentlemen bring to the boardroom table, there are two endearing qualities that they've developed in the past 8 weeks. One, they've become staunch Rider fans, and they also tolerate my sense of humor. So thanks, guys. And those of you who know me know how bad that can be on occasion, for sure. For those of you that have participated in our rate-setting sessions in previous years, you'll know we have a good deal of information to cover this morning. We will have time for questions at the end and hope to wrap up in about 2 hours. In a few minutes, I'll pass things along to Peter Federker, our CEO, who will explain the 2016 preliminary premium rates in more detail and outline the process for determining those rates. In addition, we will share our prevention strategy and give you the financial information and outlook for 2016. Peter and I and our board are joined today by several members of the WCB executive and staff who are here to answer questions should you have questions that pertain to their department. In addition, this year, to encourage participation, we have combined our industry rate sessions together with today's general session. WCB staff will be available at the tables in the far corner to answer industry-specific questions following our question period. You will be able to get an industry package for your rate code. Each industry package includes rate code-specific statistics as well as the 2016 preliminary premium rate. The question period will be open to everyone attending, including those who are joining us by webcast today. And welcome to those people, of course, who are joining us by webcast as well. We will have time for a maximum of 2 questions per person, so everyone has an opportunity to ask their question. Please note your questions throughout the presentation and hold them until our question period at the end of the presentation. These meetings, ladies and gentlemen, are an annual part of our rate-setting process, and we believe they are an important step in our accountability to you, our customer. It is also important for you to give us your feedback on those proposed rates. If you'd like to learn more about what we do, I would also invite you to attend our annual Compensation Institute held in Regina in April, and our AGMs in May in both Regina and Saskatoon. Also, if you'd like more detailed information, we will be tabling our annual report in the spring. We also publish an annual stakeholder report that provides a comprehensive overview of our annual activities. We truly appreciate your attendance this morning and, again, taking the time out of your schedules to be with us this morning. Some of you may know that prior to me becoming chair of the WCB, I held many different positions and businesses throughout the province. So I know when we talk about vision statements, your eyes might glaze over. I understand that. We like to have this slide as part of the presentation because at WCB, we live this vision statement every day, all day. We work to embody the statement in our daily activities when interacting with our customers, working hard to make things better for employers and workers every single day. Having these general sessions, providing a live broadcast, and making today's information available online after these meetings is all a result of our efforts to continuously improve our service to you. Our efforts to be good stewards of your funds mean that we continue to have one of the lowest premium rates in the country. This brings me to our next slide, our premium rate history and the 2016 preliminary average premium rate. We are pleased, very pleased, to announce the preliminary average premium rate for 2016 is $1.34. Yes, you heard right, $1.34, down from $1.46 last year. That's a 12-cent or 8% drop. This is our lowest premium rate in 3 decades. In 30 years, ladies and gentlemen, our lowest average premium rate. Thank you. It's a testament to the good work that everyone does, but also a testament to yourselves as well. In 2004, our average employer premium was at a 13-year high of $2.05. Since then, we've had a series of decreases that have resulted in a 71-cent or 34.6% drop from '04. This continued rate reduction is because of your commitment with your employees to reduce the number of injuries in your workplace. I'd like to take a few minutes to share a truly inspirational story about how committing to safety not only protects workers, but how it also contributes to the bottom line. In 1987, a gentleman by the name of Paul O'Neill became the CEO of an aluminum company called Alcoa, huge aluminum company. During his first speech to the shareholders, he said that his focus as CEO was going to be on worker safety. Now, if you could imagine, you're a shareholder, you're in New York, and you sit down to hear the presentation by the CEO, and you're expecting something more dynamic, more specific about how to increase, perhaps, shareholder profits. But no, he said his focus was going to be on worker safety. And he goes on to say, every year, numerous Alcoa workers are injured so badly that they miss a day of work. Our safety record is better than the general American workforce, especially considering that our employees work with metals at 1,500 degrees and with machines that can rip a man's arm off. But it's not good enough. And that's the end of the quote. He told the astonished crowd his goal was to make Alcoa the safest company in the U.S. His goal, 0 injuries, 0 fatalities, 0 suffering. The crowd in New York was silent. They were not expecting this at all. They thought the CEO had lost his mind. Investors, quite frankly, thought he was crazy. Some investment advisors advised their clients to sell their Alcoa shares. But one investment advisor later said that was the worst advice he had ever given his clients. By focusing on reducing injuries, in 13 years, Alcoa's net income had quadrupled. I'll say that again. In 13 years, their profit had quadrupled. Net income, had quadrupled. Their lost days of work by 2012 went from 1.86 to 0.125. Again, from 1.86 to 0.125. I share this with you to say, yes, investing in worker safety can and is profitable. And if you'd like to Google that, by all means, go ahead. Paul O'Neill, Alcoa, the story's there. Some of our compensation board counterparts have also announced their 2016 average premium. Others will be letting employers know their premium plans in the next few weeks. We are anticipating in Saskatchewan, we will have the 4th lowest premium rate in Canada. Having said all that, right now, I'd like to ask our CEO, Peter Federko, to come to the podium and present to you the details around the 2016 preliminary premium rates. Peter.
Boss. Good morning, everyone. I'd just like to join with Gord first to thank you for coming out this morning and sharing with us some of your very valuable time. Welcome to those customers who are joining us by live stream webcast as well. We truly appreciate your interest and feedback into the compensation system that we continuously strive to improve. So the first question, I guess, that people ask often is, why do we pay premiums anyway? Why do we need workers' compensation? And without going into history too far back, prior to 1913 in Canada, and it started much earlier over in Europe, but the only recourse workers had if they actually got injured at work was to actually sue their employer. Very seldom were workers successful, and responsibility then for their livelihood and well-being fell on the social security systems of the day. Employers, on the other hand, when they were sued by workers and the lawsuit was successful, most times actually went out of business. So starting in Ontario, the government formed a special task force headed up by a guy by the name of Sir William Meredith. And Meredith said, we need to put in a system in place that provides compensation and medical aid to workers who are injured on the job. And so what's often referred to as the historical compromise was struck as a result of Meredith's work. And the historic compromise was simply this: employers agreed to fund 100% the costs of a workers' compensation system, and workers in turn gave up the right to sue their employer. Meredith's thought was summarized in 5 principles, and those principles are basically that it was a no-fault insurance program that was to be put in place, that employers were to be collectively liable for the costs that were associated with the system, that benefits would be secured, basically guaranteed and funded by employers, and the last 2 are around the governance of the workers' compensation system, and that was to ensure that the compensation system was not influenced politically, but run by an independent board who had exclusive jurisdiction to determine all matters relating to the workers' compensation legislation. So that first or second principle of Meredith's, called collective liability, is really one of the cornerstones to our rate-setting process. And what it implies for you and for us is that industries in our province of Saskatchewan are jointly, employers within those industries, I should say, are jointly responsible for all of the costs of claims associated with that industry. So all bankers are grouped together in what we call a rate code or an industry code. All healthcare is in another code, and so on and so forth. So based on your underlying business, your industrial undertaking, as we like to say sometime, you're grouped into these rate codes and collectively share the costs of claims within that industry code. So every employer starts out by paying the same base premium as every other employer in that particular industry code. In Saskatchewan, we have 50 such classifications, ranging from agriculture all the way down to utilities and everything in between. The premium rate really is just a mathematical calculation made up of claims costs divided by payroll. The claims costs, in turn, are affected by primarily 2 things. Injuries, the number of injuries that we pay, that we measure through something we call the injury rates. And injury rates are simply the number of injuries that occur and are accepted by us, divided by the number of people that are covered by the compensation system. Durations are the other factor that influences claims costs, and durations are simply the length of time that an individual stays on compensation. So things like severity of injury, effectiveness of process, effectiveness of return to work programs can affect the duration of those claims. The longer someone is on compensation, obviously the higher the costs and potentially the greater the premium rate. So looking at the first element, premium rate, we depict here 2 different premium rates. So the big bar is something that we call the total injury rate. Total injury rate is simply all claims that we've accepted divided by number of workers covered. The gold or yellow bar is something we call the time loss injury rate. And the time loss injury rate is the number of injuries divided by full-time equivalents where the worker has been outside of the workforce for at least 1 day beyond the day of injury. So if they've received wage loss payments from us due to absences from work as a result of a workplace injury, we count those as a lost time claim. And as you can see, we've got a really nice trend going here with respect to the reduction in both total claims as well as the time loss claims. So the difference between total and what we call time loss claims are our medical only or no time loss claims. And those are claims where someone, let's say, cuts their finger, goes to the hospital or the doctor, receives stitches, and is back to work the very next day. So very low costs associated with those no time loss claims, where the bulk of the costs are with respect to the compensation system is through our time loss injuries. And so we tend to focus a lot of attention on that. And you'll see another reduction. This is now going to be the 13th year, 2015. If our projections hold to the end of the year, this will be the 13th consecutive year where we've seen that time loss injury rate decrease. We're forecasting right now an injury rate at the end of 2015 of 2.14%, which is below our target of 2.2. We hope to hit at 2.2%. The total injury rate, likewise, 6.62% is below our target of 6.8%. So a good trend going on here in terms of the reduction in the number of injuries. So because this is a mathematical calculation, it's affected really by a couple of things: the number of injuries and the number of workers covered. And if we look back to this 5-year period starting in 2010 through the end of 2014, we've seen very, very large decreases in claims, 2,600 fewer time loss claims over that 5-year period. We've seen growth in payroll to the tune of about $5.6 billion, which converts into about 62,000 additional full-time equivalents working in the province. So when the number of people working effectively is increasing, but the number of injuries is decreasing, mathematically, it's just going to prove out to be a lower injury rate. On the total injury rate side, likewise, significant reduction over that 5-year period, 4,600 fewer total claims that we have paid in 2014 compared to 2010. And as you can see, we're projecting that that trend will continue through 2015. The next factor that influences costs are our claim durations. Claim durations are just the average number of days over a 12-month period that a worker is on compensation. First thing I want to point out is 2012, because it really sticks out as a bit of a sore thumb there. And that's really an anomaly in our trends, impacted by the implementation of a new claim system in 2012, which caused some problems with our data. So this is a bit of an anomaly here. We saw that correction here, and now a leveling out of our durations to roughly 37 days. We're projecting a slight decrease to the end of the year. So what impacts the duration of claims are really a couple of things. As I said, the severity of a claim, so the more severe an injury. So if I have a sprained wrist as opposed to a broken hand, you're probably going to be on compensation, barring effectiveness of return to work programs. You're probably going to be on compensation longer because the recovery period is longer. The second thing that impacts this is actually what's happening on the injury prevention side. So what we're finding when we look at our data is that the claims that are being prevented are the less severe claims. So the ones that are left over are the more serious injuries, the more severe claims, divided by the same number of claims gives you a greater increase. Our analysis shows that change in demographics in terms of a shift from the easier kind of simple claims to the more complex can attribute up to 2 days of that duration. We have targeted for 2016 a duration of 35.5 days, which we hope to achieve through process improvement. So we look at the number of claims, and I've already gone through this earlier. Big reduction in the number of claims paid. Between 2014 and 15, based on our forecast, we're looking at 780 fewer claims, time loss claims that is. We're seeing a slight uptick in the no time loss claims, an increase of about 260 claims there. So a net difference of about 520 claims or so. Fewer claims that we're expecting to pay in 2015 than we paid in 2014. For those of you who attended before know that we kind of have this rule of thumb that every time loss claim costs roughly $10,000. So if we take 500, well in our case, 780 time loss claims out of the system between 2014 and 15, that equates to $7.8 million. If we look at the 2,600 fewer time loss claims that have been taken out between 2010 and 14, that equates to $26 million per year. That injury prevention programs and strategies are saving the compensation system and contributing toward this reduced premium rate. I talked a little bit about severity, and so changing severity. So we like to look at this, what we call the claims distribution, and this just tells us where the claims are happening, what are the most frequent type of injury, and what are the most costly types of injury. And you'll see the injury that is most frequent, at 20% of our claims are hand injuries. But you'll see that the cost associated with those hand injuries is relatively low at roughly 6%. Back injuries, on the other hand, they only make up about 17% of our claims, but account for over 20% of the costs of the system. So when we consider the severity, so when we look at this year over year as well, so you'll see the most frequent are hands, most expensive are backs, followed by legs, followed by shoulders, followed by what we call multiple injuries. So that's someone in a crash or a crush where many things could go wrong or have gone wrong, and many different types of injuries have been sustained. The change in this demographic between the 5-year period ending last year in 2014 to this year, 2015, is virtually identical. But if we go 2 years back, we see that the percentage of claims that were back injuries was about 3% lower in 2013 for that 5-year period ending than they were in 14 and 15. So we are seeing indications that the demographics of the claim, more claims are being made up of back injuries than they were 2 years ago. And of course, those are very, very costly claims to resolve. We look at our costs now, and you'll see our costs are broken down between health care, compensation, earnings replacement, survivor, and vocational rehabilitation. Health care is simply the cost of all medical care that's provided to injured workers in their recovery process, whether that is medications, whether it's ambulance rides, surgeries, MRIs, anything associated from a medical perspective with that injury, we have responsibility for and pay. It is the fastest growing component of our claim costs, driven by two things. First of all, just something generally called medical inflation, and this is a phenomena that is being experienced not just in Saskatchewan, right across Canada, right across North America and around the world, this notion of medical inflation, which is essentially the escalation of costs of medical aid, generally speaking, running at least double what general inflation is. The second thing that we've noticed this year is the number of referrals to secondary and tertiary assessment and treatment. So that's where we'll send someone whose recovery isn't proceeding as well as we had hoped to an independent assessment and or treatment in order to get them back on track and back to work. We've seen the number of referrals into secondary and tertiary assessment and treatment programs increase, and the duration of their stay in those programs to become lengthy as well. Again, an indication perhaps of the severity of the injuries that we are seeing come through our system relative to what we used to see. Compensation, this is the short-term wage loss. So basically, as a rule of thumb, anybody paid up to 2 years would be classified as a wage loss or short-term wage loss compensation payment. Slight increase being projected, mostly driven by the increase in the maximum insurable. So the maximum insurable wage is increasing in 2016. So some of you may recall, January 1, 2014, new legislation was introduced which increased the maximum insurable. Our objective is to get us to 165% of average weekly wage in Saskatchewan by the end of 2019. And after that, it will become indexed by the change in average weekly wage. So our progression to get to that 165% takes us to roughly $69,200 compared to $65,130. So the maximum insurable today is $65,130. January 1st, 2016, it's going up to over $69,000. So because we're anticipating simply we're going to be paying out more compensation, that has been actually built into our projection of what our claim costs will be to the end of the year. We're seeing a decrease in earnings replacement. Earnings replacement are our long-term wage loss. So people who typically have permanent impairments, who receive at least some element of wage loss for the rest of their working careers. We're seeing a decrease there, mostly because more people are falling off, coming out of the earnings replacement system than are going in. Voc rehab and survivor benefits, modest decreases in very small elements of our overall claims costs. The other important element, as I said earlier, in calculating the premium rates is the payroll. So the premium rate, again, is just a calculation, mathematical calculation of claims cost divided by payroll. We are projecting for 2016 a 5.6% increase in payroll. Silence. Not possible. So we gather industry information from looking at different kinds of research, from actually asking industry. And this is what we're seeing and being told. Last year, at this time when we were projecting payroll for 2015, we projected payroll of $21.15 billion. We're seeing that payroll come in at $21.25 billion, an actual increase over what we expected in 2015. So there is definitely economic growth going on. Steve Wallace will know heavy construction has been very, very good this year. We're seeing growth in that particular sector. The automotive implement sales industry, we're seeing significant growth in that particular industry, and others as well. So even though everyone focuses on what's happening in our resource sector, and for sure payrolls within those sectors are muted, if not slightly decreasing, we are continuing to see growth in other sectors that are propping up our payroll and, again, causing us to forecast a 5.6% increase in 2016. Important assumption that we would appreciate some feedback on.
Do you have any
John.
idea what Alberta's is?
So the question was, any idea what Alberta's is? No, they haven't released their information yet, but anecdotally, they're seeing payrolls decrease. Overall, they're heavily reliant on the oil and gas sector, as we all know. So this gets into our rate model now. So I kind of told you the elements that go into it. So now what do? So we sit in a room somewhere with a crystal ball and try to figure out how much we should charge for next year. So really what we're doing here today is telling you what we believe we need to charge in 2016 in order to cover all costs of all claims in 2016. So one of the premises of workers' compensation is today's employers need to pay for the cost of today's injuries. so that subsequent employers don't have to pick up the cost left behind by somebody else. So we're seeking to 100% fund, to the best of our knowledge today, all of the injuries that we expect to happen in 2016 and all the costs associated with those injuries, funded by a premium based on that payroll projection. So how do we go about doing this? We basically look at historical experience. So for compensation costs, we look at 5 years of experience, determine past spending patterns to help us determine what future spending patterns are. For healthcare, though, because of the rapid growth and the significance of medical inflation compared to general inflation, we only use 3 years of past experience to help us project what future healthcare costs might be. Kind of oversimplified, we adjusted then for current trends that we're seeing. We forecast the number of claims, we calculate a cost per claim, and we multiply that out over a 50-year period because that's how long claims can last. Someone can start working at age 15 here in our province, retire at age 65, so that's 50 years. Our responsibility for compensation ends at age 65, regardless of when the individual actually retires. We do have provision for someone injured after age 65, but that's a kind of a separate issue. So we're projecting out 50 years of future expected costs year by year, and then calculating what the present value of those claims are today, dividing it by the payroll, and out falls our premium rate. So kind of pretty straightforward in terms of the concept, but I can tell you our data governance people, our employer services people, put a lot of effort and time into figuring out what our projections would look like and what the cost of those claims might actually be. So to that point where we have the industry premium rate, which is just the revenue required, which is the present value of all of those future costs, divided by payroll falls the premium rate. As I said earlier, every employer in a particular rate code will pay that same base premium rate. So if you're in road construction, every employer in road construction will pay the same base premium rate. After that, we do something we call experience rating. So we experience rate or adjust the premium rate for the individual employer based on that individual employer's experience. So they start out paying what everybody else pays, and then they'll either pay more or they'll pay less than that industry rate based on their individual performance. The reason we do that is a couple, I guess. First, we think it acts as a financial incentive for employers to invest in health and safety. If you've got a good safety record, you're going to get a discount. If you have a bad safety record, a bad claims record, you're going to pay a penalty. So the incentive to invest is there, and I'm going to talk in a minute about how wide that range is between maximum penalty and maximum discount. But there's an incentive there for employers to invest in safety because not only is it good for your business and for your, as Gord said with the Alcoa story, saves people's lives and prevents people from getting injured, actually saves you money as well. We also want to strike a balance between all employers and employers who actually cost the system more. So if I'm a greater user of the workers' compensation system, I should pay more than every other employer in my group who's not utilizing the system as much as I am. If my injury rate is too high, if my claims costs are too high relative to everybody else, then I should pay more. And so we're trying to level the playing field, balance that collective liability concept, which says every employer in an industry code pays the same rate, with the actual cross-subsidization that might go on because one employer's got good experience and the other one has bad experience. This year, 2015, roughly 25,000 employers received discounts totaling $24.5 million. 1,535 employers received penalties or surcharges totaling $23.3 million. We had an evaluation of this program done starting in 2014. I'm going to talk about that in a second as well. Our experience rating program is built into two streams, one called the standard program and the other called the advanced program. The intention was this is for the smaller employer, the advanced program for the larger employer. So if an employer has paid us less than $15,000 in premiums over the last 3 years, then they fall into this standard program. And their discount and surcharge is determined based on the number of claims that they have. So if you have 0 claims, you're going to get maximum discount. If you have 1 claim, you might not get anything. If you have 2 claims, you're going to start paying a surcharge. And the range of that in the standard program, the maximum discount available is 25%. The maximum surcharge is 75%. So if I'm an employer who gets 25% and my competitor gets 75% surcharge, my competitor is paying twice as much as I am because of the discount that I'm getting together with the surcharge that they're paying. If I'm a large employer paying more than $15,000 at least, or in premiums over the last 3 years, I fall into this advanced program, and now this is cost-based. So if the cost of my claims is greater than, I'm oversimplifying, but if the cost of my claims is greater than the average cost of claims in my industry, I'm going to pay a surcharge. If it's better, I'm going to get a discount. And it's on a sliding scale based on a number of factors. Maximum discount available there is 30%. Maximum surcharge is 200%, which means the swing is 230%. So if I want to be competitive in my industry, and I'm paying a 200% surcharge and my competitor is getting a 30% discount, I better start investing in health and safety in order to get back to a competitive basis with those in my industry. As I said, we had the program reviewed by a committee of stakeholders starting in 2014. A report was issued with 6 recommendations, 2 of which were non-consensus recommendations. The board decided just this past summer to go out for further consultation. They did that. We received some input and feedback from you. Thank you very much for those of you who did respond to that call. The board has also asked the administration to do an analysis of those recommendations, and the board just yesterday took a decision with respect to approval of the recommendations. Those will be communicated out directly to all of those for sure who responded to our request for feedback, but also posted on our website so you can see what decisions have been taken by the board. None of those changes to the program will occur until 2017 because some of them require significant computer programming, up to 6 months of development, so we won't have that ready for January 1, 2016, but 2017 will be ready to go. I can tell you just in very general terms, the intention of the recommendations was to try and make the transition between the standard and advanced program a little smoother. So 1 year, I might, qualify under the standard program being my premiums are less than $15,000. I either have, because of the maximum insurable, for example, so now I have to start reporting, more to us in payroll. I have to start reporting higher payroll to the Workers' Compensation Board, and that's going to drive up the amount of premium that I'm paying. So I haven't really necessarily grown in terms of number of employees, but now the amount that I'm insuring has grown from 65 to 69,000, and that could push me over the 15,000. I still don't have any claims. Nothing's changed, but now all of a sudden I move from the standard program to the advanced, and there are implications for doing that. Generally speaking, when that happens, it usually reduces the discount that the employer in the standard program was receiving, or could actually push them into a surcharge position. So the recommendations that have been approved by our board are to kind of level that playing field and smooth that transition out and avoid some of those shock factors with respect to an employer today being in standard and suddenly next year they move into the advanced program. But as I said, that will be communicated in more detail directly to you and posted on our website. So Gord already told you we're expecting premium rates to go down to $1.34. What does that look like? 72% of the premium is directly the result of claims costs. 8% is a result of safety and prevention funding, and that includes occupational health and safety. It includes our WorkSafe budget, as well as funding for the industry-based safety associations. So all of that is included in that 8%. The administration, the cost of running the compensation system, accounts for about 20% of the overall premium. When we look at the individual elements of the premium rate making up that $1.34, as I said earlier, you'll see the lion's share is all related to claims costs. So of the $1.34, 96.3 cents is directly the result of claims costs, which has decreased in every category with the exception of fatalities, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. So when we look at all of the elements that go into this 96.3 cents, every one of those elements is lower than it was in 2015, except for fatalities. Now, with respect to fatalities, thank God we have not seen 2012 repeat. 2012, you may recall, there were 56 fatalities that we accepted at the Workers' Compensation Board. And while one fatality is too much, 56 was horrendous. We are seeing, to the end of September, 21 fatalities, which is down from the year before. If we simply straight line that out to the end of the year, we're looking at probably 28 fatalities to the end of 2015. 28 too many, but it is a reduction from the 36 that we saw last year. However, the fatality costs are rising. So for fatalities, just so you all know, an individual employer does not get charged with the cost of that individual fatality. Rather, what we do is we average out the fatality costs over a 10-year period, and every employer, every rate code, bears a proportion of that fatality cost, because every industry code has the opportunity and has, when we look at history, had at least one fatality in their industry. And so accordingly, those fatality costs are spread across all of the rate codes. The increase in the fatality cost in terms of the component is a result of the increase in the maximum insurable. So unfortunately, we've seen 28 people or 21 people die, projecting out to 28 or 30 at the end of the year. A lot of those were high-income earners, paid out at $65,000 maximum compared to $61,000 in 2014. So this is by no means a good news story, because anytime there are fatality costs in there is just unnerving, frankly. Our administration costs, that 20% equates to roughly 33 cents, and approximately 5 cents of that premium rate is the result of funding for safety associations. Now, I should point out that this allocation of 4.9 cents is not paid by all employers. This is simply for illustration purposes to come up with what the overall average is. It would be a fluke if someone actually paid $1.34. So it's just to show you that the $1.34 has an element for safety associations, but safety associations are actually funded by their industry. So the heavy construction, road construction safety association is 100% funded by employers who are in that R code, is what we call it. Construction, likewise, is 100% funded. Construction Safety Association, 100% funded by premiums only from employers in the construction industry. So this is just for illustration purposes. So what does this mean to the average employer? So looking strictly at the base premium rate, without any experience rating being applied, approximately 96% of employers, that's 45,683, are going to see their premium rate, base premium rate, decrease. rate codes are going to see a increase of more than 10.5%, and the remainder are going to see, 74 are going to see no change in their rate. I didn't see that little yellow sliver in there. 74 are going to see no change in their premium rate. There's a small sliver who are going to see increases less than 10.5%, and there is one rate code that is going to see an increase of more than 10.5% in 2016. When we apply experience rating, those percentages actually change. So now we see 79% or 37,800 employers who are going to see a premium decrease. We're going to see 4.6%, or 2,200 employers who are going to see no change. 5.5% roughly, 2,400 employers are going to see an increase less than 10.5%. 3,139 employers are going to see an increase greater than 10.5%. And there's a certain portion, almost 2,200 employers, who simply aren't eligible. So they're right on the average for their industry. They haven't been in business for 3 consecutive years, which is a qualifier, or they've had a fatality, would disqualify them from the program. So you see the impacts of experience rating in terms of the number of employers who will see no change, and then after you apply the experience rating, it decreases. So it goes from 96% of employers here up to, or down to 79% of employers after we apply experience rating. So we also like to give you just a snapshot of what our financials look like to the end of September and what we kind of see in terms of what the end of the year might look like. So because we've seen that bump in payroll that we weren't expecting, that from 21.15 up to 21.24, we're actually seeing, even though we dropped the premium rate, we're actually seeing premiums increase slightly. Claims costs are low compared to last year, but remember last year we had this extra charge for these occupational diseases, and so that was skewed significantly. Our actuarial adjustment last year was $57 million. We're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of $18 million in 2015, and it's all because we funded that occupational disease liability last year. It's no longer making its way into the claims costs. Our administration costs, we're seeing slightly over, driven mostly by economic increases to our staff. Bit of a higher investment in safety and prevention. By the way, our administration also, and I mentioned that earlier, would not include the health and safety. We fund that separately, but it would include the funding for our prevention unit. So the salaries and wages that are in Phil Germain's area relative to the prevention unit are included in the administration costs, but the actual costs associated with the workplace or WorkSafe program are included in our health and safety budget. Then there's annuity fund interest. That's just interest paid on basically pensions that we set aside for seriously injured workers. And then there's our legislated obligations. We are also obligated, we fund occupational health and safety 100%. We also fund the Office of the Workers' Advocate 100%. And you may know that we have committee review sitting this year. We fund those costs as well. So simply revenue minus expenses, we're looking at a underwriting profit, premiums minus costs, of roughly $5 million. Investment income, boy, we were having a great couple of quarters. The end of June, our investment income looked really good, notwithstanding the volatility of the markets. The devaluing Canadian dollar really helped our returns significantly. We invest a significant amount of money outside of Canada, and with the devaluation of the Canadian dollar, pretty much against all other currencies in the world, we were bringing more Canadian dollars home than we were before, and that had the effect of offsetting what we were seeing in terms of loss at market value. Third quarter was not so kind. The currency kind of leveled off a bit, and markets did not rebound, but we're still well ahead of budget, seeing investment income of $48.6 million for the 9 months ending September 30th, which now puts us at a comprehensive or net income of $53.7 million. Funded position at the beginning of the year was $733.7 million. I'm sure most of you know we did distribute $141 million of excess surplus earlier this summer. And so the net effect of our funded position at the end of September 2015 is $646 million. Looking at our funded position, so we have a funding policy. It has an upper limit and it has a lower limit. And so the board has directed us to operate our funded position in that range. So at 120 and down, 105 and above. So as long as we stay within that range, we really don't need to do anything from a premium rate or otherwise perspective. Our actual funded percentage, you'll see from 2011 was slightly below the 120. In 2013, we were very, very close to it. Here's the big spike in 2014 where we had these excess investment earnings. We paid out the $141 million. That dropped the 2015. But then we add in our projected income for the end of the year. We're expecting, if our trends continue the way that they are today, we're expecting to end the year at about 128.7% funded position. No decision has been taken with respect to surplus distribution. However, if we were to distribute surplus based on that 128.7, the excess, which is at 8.7%, equates to roughly $90 million. So it's not $141 million like we were able to distribute in 2015, but if things hold the way they are and we continue to generate the returns that we are, we're looking at roughly a 90% excess surplus for 2016. So that's what we know today based on what we see to the end of September and what we expect to see to the end of the year. So if you happen to be one of those employers who's seeing their premium go up, not that many of them this year, but if you happen to be one of those, there's a couple of things that you can do to try and control the growth in your premium rate. The first, of course, is to prevent injuries. So our mission zero, zero injuries, zero fatalities, zero suffering. Our quest to eliminate injuries in this province. Investing in health and safety saves lives, has huge economic costs associated with it that translate into reduced compensation costs. You can also manage the injury claims. So if in fact you do get injured, you do have an injury, working with the healthcare provider and the employer and us in an effective return to work and recovery process, getting that worker safely, sustainably back to work as early as possible also takes costs out of the system, drops that duration number, takes costs out of the system, and can lower the premiums. We have a prevention strategy under WorkSafe Saskatchewan, and all underneath our goal or objective that we call Mission Zero. So Mission Zero, as I said, is the strive, the quest to eliminate all injuries in our province. And we're doing that through two different partnerships. One we call WorkSafe Saskatchewan, which is a partnership between the Ministry of Labour Relations and Workplace Safety, and the other, a partnership we call Safe Saskatchewan, which is a partnership between WorkSafe and 10 other public and private sector employers who have formed this organization. So it runs independently. I am past president of that particular organization. We're our own nonprofit over here, funded 100% by contributions that each of us partners put in on an annual basis. So no money flowing from WCB into here other than through the WorkSafe budget to pay our proportionate share of the funding requirements. WorkSafe has developed a strategy. This strategy developed in partnership, in consultation with the Ministry of Labour Relations and Workplace Safety, Occupational Health and Safety Division. Hopefully, you have seen some of our awareness campaigns, which is the first pillar or one of the pillars of our prevention strategy. So the intention here is to create awareness, drawing attention to the significance of injury and how injuries can actually happen through our television ads, our radio ads, our newspaper ads, billboard campaigns that we have undertaken as well. In addition to that, we have specific education and training strategies. So this would be level 1, 2, or 3 occupational health and safety training. This would be training that our prevention consultants, account managers can provide to workplaces specifically on building safety management systems, good return to work programs to try and impact the injuries that might occur there. And then we have something we call our targeting strategies. Again, working in conjunction with occupational health and safety, identifying employers who would benefit most from our assistance. Having very targeted inspections from an occupational health and safety side, so we're actually going to the workplaces where the injuries are occurring, conducting occupational health and safety inspections for compliance with the regulation, but also doing inspections for the purpose of determining effectiveness of safety management systems within that particular workplace, and providing them with assistance to build safer programs and systems to make their workplaces safer and make them compliant with what the occupational health and safety regulations. Very good results being generated out of our targeting strategies as well. And lastly, and certainly not least, are our partnerships that we create. Really, Workers' Compensation Board cannot accomplish anything by itself. We are 100% reliant on the relationships that we build with our customers and stakeholders. We have over 30 partnerships with employers and labor organizations like the Federation of Labor, Chamber of Commerce, North Saskatoon Business Association. We have other partnerships with like Canadian Paraplegic Association, the CNIB, Brain Injury Association, so on and so forth, where we are working in partnership with other like-minded organizations, like-minded employers, to advocate for health and safety in our province and change the culture of our province so that we can shed this reputation that we have of having the second highest time loss injury rate in the country. And that continues to be true today. Notwithstanding these huge decreases that we're seeing in our time loss injury rate, we are second only to Manitoba in terms of having the highest time loss injury rate in the country. Elimination of injuries is what we're all about, what we're after, and it's through the integration and implementation of these 4 pillars of our WorkSafe strategy. I'd invite you to go to WorksafeSask.com, check out our works.ca, check out our website. Our entire strategic and operational plan is on there. Our balanced scorecard is on there, just to check out what we're actually up to. Some really great videos and other resources also available there. So, looking ahead to 2016, what's keeping us awake at night? What are we working on? What are we worried about? I already talked a lot about that first bullet. We will be relentless in terms of continuing to focus on improving health and safety in this province. We'll not rest until we eliminate injuries in this province. Looking at our own processes through continuous process improvement culture, talking to you, our customers, finding out how we can best serve you, how we can increase the value for you as a customer of our workers' compensation system. When I talk about customers, I'm talking about both. I'm talking about the employers who fund our system, and I'm talking about the workers who have to access our services. Increasing the value for both of those customers through continuous process improvement has been a quest of ours for 2 years, will be a quest into perpetuity, or at least as long as I'm still here, and unless someone else changes the direction. We're undertaking a review of our rate-setting model. Employers have asked us in the past, is your model still appropriate? Is it reactive enough? Our model was never designed to produce the fastest, lowest premium rate. Rather, it was designed to produce stable, steady decreases that reflect sustained performance. And so we've been challenged whether that 5-year view of historical experience is really representative of today's experience, whether this model should react faster, whether the assumptions underneath that model are still valid and whether they're producing honest premium rates. So we are in the RFP process right now, selecting an actuarial firm to conduct a review of our entire rate setting model. Any changes that we hope would be ready for 2017, but we'll see how all that rolls out. We've also undertaken a review of our funding policy. We undertook an asset liability study in 2014, reported out in 2015 on that, where we had another external actuary independently look at our investment strategies to determine whether we were matching our investments properly with our expected liabilities, and also determine whether our funding policy was in fact adequate and could sustain. I mean, we're worried about going into an unfunded position. So would this funding policy, combined with our investment policy, sustain a funded position well into the future? We received that report, a couple of recommendations that we're currently fleshing out. We'll have a policy in front of our board, I hope, before the end of the year. And once that decision is taken, we can inform you about that as well. And then I mentioned this earlier, our maximum wage rate's increasing to $69,242. So be mindful, employers, even though your premium rate is going down, your insurance base is actually increasing from $65,000 to $69,000. You may actually pay us the same total premium or more, even though your premium rate's going down, because of the growth in this maximum assessable wage. So the fact that premiums are decreasing is not always going to mean the size of the check you're writing to us next year is going to be smaller. Again, because your insurance base is growing. Next steps. So we, after today's meeting, we will conduct a similar meeting in Saskatoon tomorrow for those of our customers in the north half of our province. By the end of October, we hope to gazette the rates. So as I said, there's one rate code with, I think, 74 or 15 employers in it who's seeing their rate go up by more than 10.5%. Under our legislation, we're required to publish that in the Saskatchewan Gazette, and it has to sit there for 30 days for a chance for any employer affected, and within that industry code, affected by that premium rate to provide any input to the board. After that period of time, we collect any feedback, and again, you don't have to be a gazetted employer or worker in order to provide feedback to us about what we're sharing with you here today. So we will collect all of that feedback, and in November, we'll report that out to the board, get the board to approve the final rates by the end of November, and early December, we'll mail out individual rate letters to all employers, advising them of what their individual premium rate will be for 2016. Thank you again for your patience. I hope the information was useful and helpful to you, and be happy to take any questions now. So thanks again.